I am, but I think it can be a little bit prettier in terms of the CSS and HTML.
Okay. Yeah, so what we're going to do today, so we'll have everybody go through and just show what they've got, and then we'll try and help each other with how to improve the styling. Like you can talk about what the issues are and what you would like to do, and we'll try to give you advice on where to go or how to get started with that. So, and hopefully you'll see, oh, that's the thing I was trying to do in somebody else's project, and then you can go copy their code essentially. So.
Okay, so my computer was in the shop.
Yep.
How do I get back into
To the drill. Let me see. So your stuff is good news. That's what GitLab's for. So. This command is. Do you have Slack on there yet, or?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Find your workspace, I think, is what. Or no, that's okay. All right, sorry.
Thank you. I think it's happening last time.
Go to, yeah, you can go find your Slack workspace. Yeah.
Just my area.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Cool. All right. So you click on DC. Scroll all the way to the bottom. Copy that first line. So paste space and type the email address associated with it. Just press enter. Okay. So now we have to, if you type cat, take, yep, Yep, space tilde slash dot ssh slash id underscore rsa dot pub. So this is your public key. Yep. And then copy. Just copy everything from SSH-RSA through your monitors. Okay. So you got one, two, it's okay with this one.
That's a basic address.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to GitLab now. So GitLab.com. And then click on your profile and go to settings. And then make the screen logo bigger so you can see the words. This thing should be like SSH. Just paste. I'm going to delete that first line. And then press it down and delete. And then go to the last line. I'm going to delete that too. That last line. Keep going. And there you go. Track key. Okay, so now you have the Git stuff. So now if you go to groups, that would be your groups. We're going to flatten these leaves and scroll down to responsive. Click on this copy thing, then go back to your terminal. Then you want to type mkdir space code, so get code directory, and then cd space code, and then get space clone space paste. So paste the so actually command B.
Oh,
yeah, paste it. Unix install. So it's downloading all the Git tools for you.
Okay.
So Max kind of come up with by default, which is to say Xcode has it available, but it's not installed, so it's just installing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what are these last two
So we've just worked on our projects, using CSS projects, just the last piece. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have that ready, it's fine, but yeah, it's great too. And then today we'll start with JavaScript stuff officially. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it works. Also, the stuff that we did go over last time, it is available. If you go to Slack and go to the DCFE08 and then click on the pin. Scroll down over here. There's that. There. You take to link. It's all recorded, so you can watch. Cool. Yeah. Hey.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I found some code to make your comment box and store it in local storage,
Yep.
but something's wrong with it. Like first of all, I don't at all understand it. I just copied it.
Yep.
But something is wrong because it is saying this comment text on the page instead of printing the comment.
They say super freedom.
Cool.
Yeah.
Same computer back, or you get it in
Just use screen.
Oh, I see.
Nice.
So the reason why it's doing that is because you're using Angular, like that code that you had as Angular framework stuff. So you have to include Angular at the top of the page. So if you go to your index.html page, so you would want to somewhere in here, or actually scroll over to the bottom just to make sure. Yeah, so yes. So the way that you're doing it is with Angular as a framework. To get into how that works is a little bit too costly right now. We may do this like Angular or React on, I think in 2 weeks on a Saturday on like the 20th or the 21st. I was going to have you guys come to my office if you're interested, and we will go over how to do something like this, like how to actually use a framework to implement JavaScript. The problem with this is like you have to have a basic understanding of Angular to be able to make this work, and it's kind of out of the scope of just using JavaScript. But we can use as an example how to create a comment in pure JavaScript as we get into that today.
Cool.
So let's approach it that way.
Okay.
But that's great you're trying. I mean, you can't learn unless you try, so. So we'll give people a couple more minutes to show up, and then we'll start by going over everybody's projects.
The white that comes as the default background, is it not white? My brother, I don't know that he does that work. I don't know what he does. But he was like, oh, you should make the background white. That's not white. And I was like,
It is white though?
what are you talking about?
Yeah, so it probably is white. That is the default typically for the background, and you can prove it. So it might not look completely white because like the contrast etc. on your screen, but if you right click on it, inspect. Here, go into the style tag. It's right here, the element style. Yeah, type background dash color. And then tab. And then type white. Yeah, it didn't change colors. That's what. It just doesn't look quite white because of the screen and the contrast and stuff. Hey, how you doing? Good. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. If it's cool with you, I'm going to record so other people who aren't here can see what you guys are doing. All this is behind a private YouTube channel, so it's not like you can't just search and get there. You have to have the link to get there, so don't worry about people just finding you. But what we're going to do, the process is going to work as you get up and you show what you built and why you talk a little about why you built it and what some of the cool things that you found were and what some of the struggles that you had were. And then we will look at your code a little bit and see where you were having issues, etc. And we'll try and help you out with that. So just an opportunity to sort of demo what you've been working on and to get some feedback. Who wants to go first?
I'll go. So how do I?
You can go to Solstice, which I think use the browser and go to we.co/connect. Enter the display name and screen code found in the bottom left-hand corner. So Flatiron DC Turing 7159. Remember to disconnect, or there is also just like a connector.
Do that. When I use at home, I've got a 22-inch monitor that really helps.
Yeah. Yeah, when you become a developer, you want bigger screens and more screens.
All right, so this is my page. I've got, it's a fan page for Miles Davis, one of my favorite artists. Got a little biography. Scroll down, we've got some top albums, just some basic images, and some links to YouTube videos.
Oh, it's because it's local. Have you pushed it? Because you could go.
I did push it.
So you can go to responsive.flatiron-dc. Just in your browser. If you just go to responsive.flatiron-dc.com. Yep. /v.
Okay.
It was there. If you delete that and press dot. Delete. Delete the slash and put a dot. It's right there. Dot. It's like 3 down. Yep. And then you just have to do /v at the end. There you go.
Cool.
Not.
Yeah, so got some videos linked from YouTube.
Nice.
And then for sake of the fact that I ripped this biography from the website, I put a reference link in on the bottom, which is external, which I know we don't want, but this is where I did get it from, so it's not showing. But anyways,
Just go forward one. You just went back to forward. There you go.
cool. So it's pretty simple. Well, also what I did is I linked my nav bar to, so if you go to top albums, it'll bring you there. Live performances will link you down to live performances.
You want to talk a little bit about how you did that? Because I don't think we can talk much about that.
Yeah, so if we go to my... So in my nav bar, I created a href. You can see that here. I did pound biography, right? So that's going to link that down to
So I think it's going to take you down to where your class of biography is. If you go find the top albums, scroll down.
Because I did a name for time.
Yeah,
I
name
forgot
is
to do
top.
it, right?
Maybe you
So
just
that's what I
didn't
should
do
have done for biography as well. So you gotta do a tag for what you want to link, and then when you go up top, if you want to link it on the same page, you have to do a hashtag. And if you want to do it on a separate page, you would, and if you create a different folder for it, you do a dot to that folder to link it. But it's all on the same page for me, so that's why I just linked it doing the hashtag.
Yeah, so what the hashtag does, it says, don't leave this page, but I have some additional metadata that I want to use. And in this case, what you're doing is saying when I click on the link, I want you to take me down to wherever there's an element with the name of live performance or top albums or whatever the case may be.
Right. So going to my CSS, one thing I had trouble with was that, so I found that I made biography, top albums, and live performances pretty much the same, right? They've got the same kind of layout. But when I tried to change all of them into one class, because I found it a little bit redundant to make them all separate classes, when I tried to condense them down to one class, it got really weird. It didn't want to do it like I wanted to, so I had to separate them out. And you can see that all the quantifiers of these are the same.
All the properties are the same.
Properties are the same.
So let's just try it. So let's just change dot biography to be, well, yep. So dot biography to be something.
Something.
Sure.
I'll do it for the rest. Right?
No, you don't care about the rest of them.
Okay.
So if you go to the index.html now, those three classes, so where it says biography, change that to something. And then if you scroll down to where top albums is, just change that class to something. And if you scroll down to where live performances are, change that class to something. That should be it. I think it did it get saved? The index.css doesn't look like it's saved for blue. Cancel. You're on index.html though. You have to click on index.css and then save. There we go. So you probably want to go to your local version though, because those changes aren't reflected because you haven't posted yet. So if you go back to the, just click back a couple times. Keep going. Oh, is it in that other tab? Actually, Miles Davis fan page.
Yep.
So yeah, if you refresh this page, yep, so it's all there.
Cool, so I can delete the rest.
Yep.
Awesome. I don't know what happened with when I was doing it.
Yeah, so that's similar. You can actually, you just delete the other pieces because with the class, you can just apply it as many times as you want
right?
to.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. I don't know what I did. My other question was, so I've got two Flex containers, right?
Yep.
So they're both the Flex container class. So one is for the images of the albums and one is for the live performances.
Yep.
So there's one here, right here, and there's one here. So I actually would have preferred this one to be, I like this horizontal. I wanted this one to be vertical. I thought it would have made the page look a little bit better.
Yep.
So if I do multiple Flex containers within one page, can I do like a -1? Or is Flex container like a element that...
Flex container is just like a variable. It's just what we happen to call a class. You could name one of them blue and the other one red and do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Like you can name it blue sky and red eagle. It's the same as you naming something or top albums or whatever. So Flex container just happens to be what we name the class because it is a Flex container. We're just trying to be descriptive in our class name.
Okay.
But you could...
So if I want to make this one into a column rather than a row, live performances.
Yeah. So you could even just name the so you want the videos to be, the live performances. So instead of using Flex container there, just name it videos or something.
Okay.
And then if we go back to your CSS, copy Flex container. And just paste it underneath. Yep. Change it to videos. And you see there where it says Flex direction is a row.
So change to column.
Yep. And then Flex wrap doesn't necessarily make sense for column.
Because it's going to just shrink down anyways, right?
Yeah. space around is fine, lines, that's all fine.
Okay. Just want to make sure that I did videos.
There you go.
Great. Perfect. If I had more time, I was going to do some padding and some borders around all that, which I can still do, but make it look a little more pretty. But yeah,
Looks
so
good.
that's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
Nice. Very nice. Any other questions or?
So in my HTML, because I do tend to like HTML, I added a lot of breaks, as you can see here. Would it be better to separate these out into like this text into some kind of a flex box or a flex container rather than?
Yeah, it's probably, so what you're really trying to do, right, is you want a header, like who was Miles Davis as a header, right? So you want to decide on what size header you want. It's probably like an H2
Okay.
or an H3, so you
Sure.
just make an H2 and H3.
Sure.
And then the pieces that are underneath of it are really paragraphs,
Yep.
so you would just put them inside of a P tag,
Mm-hmm.
and then that would probably get you.
Okay, so what I did was I made the entire thing a P tag. So I should add some more.
So that
headers.
would probably be, and
This
this
should be.
from a semantic text perspective,
Mhm.
instead of P, it should probably be article, which is really just a div, but it describes like I have a big block of text that's coming in here.
Okay.
And then instead of doing B to bold it, you want to
And
choose.
it didn't bold it actually, which I was surprised about.
So strong is the
I
more
tried
common.
strong as well, but I also did add a CSS element to paragraph, which is color black and text line center. So I didn't know if that would.
No, that
Or
shows.
shouldn't, because I tried strong and it didn't.
It does look like all of your text is strong somehow, which could be that you have a class that's declaring it to be strong somewhere else. Oh, you know what it is? I see it right there. See the B that's on line 23?
Yep.
Everything's bold. Everything
Maybe
underneath
that,
that
that should have
tag.
been a break. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So I can even just, yeah, so I can keep that as a break. That should, there we
Yeah,
go. Okay.
yeah.
So now that is bold. Cool. Okay. But I should make these headers. That should be
Yeah,
like
ideally.
header 3, header 3, header 3.
Yep. And then each one of those smaller paragraphs, which each one's a paragraph, should be inside of a P tag.
Okay. And then also, if I wanted to condense, so I don't really like how the font is going from all the way from one side of the page to the other.
Mhm.
If I want to condense that down,
Yep. You could give a max width to your paragraph tag,
so I do that in CSS,
Mhm.
right? Okay.
or you could, yeah, that's really
Okay.
the best way to do it.
Cool.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
All right. Who wants to go next?
So this is the website. It's basically a photo grid of all of my nieces and nephews and godchildren. There are 9. Each person has 2 photos, so there's not that many of them. There's just 9. And it's responsive, so when you reduce the screen size, first it goes to 2 columns at some point. Yeah, and then it goes to 1.
Yeah, you can. It's probably just widthwise. So if you just go this way instead of, it should do the same thing.
Yeah. On mobile, it's just 1.
Yep.
And then if you click a photo, it'll take you to their profile page with the little information at the bottom. And that's pretty much it. Do you want to see my code?
Yeah. So what was the coolest thing you think you did?
I think getting the grid to work. I really wanted it to look like a grid with all of the different sizes of the photos, so that was probably it. I tried to put this comment box at the bottom, but it doesn't work because I don't know how to use JavaScript, but we're gonna learn that later. But yeah, getting the grid to work. The pages are pretty flat. So the code is pretty repetitive. You can see it here. So it's coded in flex. So first there's a row and then all of the different columns of photos are here. And then this is the comment box at the bottom. Each child has a page. Oh, these are the photos. Each child has a page down here. And they all share the same style sheet. So the 2 CSS files I have are this one for this one for the main photo grid page. Just pretty simple. I just changed the font, imported a font here.
Sorry, one second.
Okay.
Hey, Jen, are you downstairs? Okay, I'll be down in a second.
Do you want me to get them?
Yeah, can you go grab it? Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I just imported a font here, changed some colors, pretty simple, and then the individual CSS pages all look like this. That was it.
Yeah, so can you go over, like, how did you get the font to look like that?
The Disney font?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had to download this font here, and then I saved it to a folder called font. Where is that?
Probably there. Cool.
Oh, here it is. So I created a font folder, downloaded the font, and saved it here. And so then in the font face, what do you call that?
Selector.
Selector, I imported the font, and the path is the internal path where it's saved on my computer. And what is it?
Okay, so then I think, yeah, line 6, or sure. Yeah, so on line 6 there, so you see on line 2, you're naming what you want to call the font in the rest of your CSS file. That's like a variable. So that variable then becomes available to you, and wherever you want to use it, you do like you do on line 6. So it says font family for anything inside of the header tag should be my first font, which is really referencing font / Waltograph 42.
Yeah.
And I changed the font down here, but this is already recognized by CSS, so I didn't have to import it.
Yeah, so what that really is, it's that it's recognized by the browser already. No, that's cool. It's great. It's interesting. So one of the things that we're going to see as we get into JavaScript, right? If you look at each one of your pages, so like Jada and Jalen, and so each one of these is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right? You're just changing a couple little variables. And so you're copying and pasting all of this code and you're writing it over and over and over again. Whenever you start to do that with code, that's where JavaScript comes in handy. That's where variables come in handy. What you can do is say, well, really, I just need to have an object that has the full name, their age, their zodiac sign, and their known aliases, right? And then when I click on that particular image, I want to pass that object to this new page that's just one page, and I want it to be able to display these things. So we might actually start, if it's okay, off of your branch to do some JavaScript things so that you can see how to make that happen.
So when you would put the JavaScript to switch them out, where would you, so they wouldn't all have an HTML page?
They wouldn't. You maybe have one additional HTML page. You probably don't even have another HTML page. You probably just show or hide a small section of code.
And they would still link to another page, or it would just change?
No, it would just change. When you click on the link, it would just change what the values were.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Okay. Well, that is it.
Cool. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
That started up.
Okay.
So I have a question, say, in the
Yeah,
meantime.
yeah.
To complete this lab, we have to deploy it to a website. Should we use Surge to do that, just for the sake of the?
Oh, for the sake of that thing?
Mm-hmm.
No, just create a.
That,
Yeah, just a pass. It's you do the same thing you do in the previous lab. It's like create a my underscore first my page.html or something.
mm-hmm.
If you create it and you put a word in there and then file, you pass.
Oh, okay.
Like it's not actually checking anything.
Got it. Because it said deploy your site to web hosting.
Yeah, but you'll see even when you're supposed to do that, it also tells you to create a file and in that file to put the name of the URL that your website exists at.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, you can put anything in there and you'll pass the test.
Got it.
So, I mean, you could actually put your URL that exists, the responsive.flatiron-gc.com/v, but it's not going to go and check that or anything. It's not.
And can I also plug back in and see if I've made it good for a mobile device as well as full screen?
Yep.
So I think I did, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So let's check. You said go to inspect, right? And
Yeah.
then
Just make the size of the screen smaller, really. So you can do it a couple ways. So the easiest way to check is if you click on that tablet phone looking thing.
this
Yep. And then change it from responsive in the top middle
one. Mhm.
to just choose like iPhone 6 or something.
Got it.
That's what it'll look like on mobile. Yep.
So that's good.
Yep. Yep. So what happens, the most interesting thing that changes, right? So it all gets smaller.
Switch down, right?
But the most interesting thing that changes is if you scroll down a little bit further,
That
the top albums went from being in a row to being in a column, and that's because you used flex wrap. So they say, hey, I don't have any more space to go wide, so I'm going to drop down a row, and that's how that's happening.
Cool.
It's the same way that your current stuff is happening.
Got it. Awesome.
Sam, what do you want us? What should I do?
Yeah, so we just show us your site, tell us why you built it, tell us something cool about what you found while you were working on it, and then we can talk about any struggles that you had while you were working on it. And we'll look at both the site and then some code.
So, alright, so this is the site. Let me grab this in a second. Alright. With the brochure site, I just had an idea just to kind of do like a company's website, where a customer would kind of like come to a landing page, see a few links, descriptions, and be able to kind of like put their contact information in. So I only added a few elements, nothing too crazy. In the header, I knew I wanted to put an image, so I added an image to the header element. We have the nav here. These links don't go anywhere, but they are a nav. All right. And I also added a section here, and then you'll see with the CSS, just played around with like the borders, font families, things of that nature. Here's another picture here, image here, and then here is, well, I actually just took that out. I don't know why that's there. All right, so and then there's the form input here that I added as well. So I've got the text area, the numbers, and all that stuff.
Yep.
So that's pretty much it. So I put this one aside, as we'll see here. Can you see that? On my screen, it's hella small. So that's the HTML there. All right, and then that's the CSS that I have applied. So I actually used, for the forms, I also used field set. It's kind of like a div for the form. Added some CSS to the image. See the nav here where we aligned it center. And that's pretty much it. Any questions?
All right, so a couple things. It looks like you were trying to do a footer, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, I was struggling with it. I got it to work one time, but then it kind of got swallowed up in this photo right here the last time I put it down there.
Yep. So can we look at your footer? Here's a footer. That's all good. So if you go back to your CSS, is there a footer inside of here? Did you delete
I deleted it.
So put it back for a second. Oh, no. Or just Command Z so we can see what it was. Keep going.
Oh, keep going.
Like keep pressing Command Z. Going.
Oh,
There we go. Position fixed. So the position fixed is what's causing it to get stuck there.
Okay.
If you just remove that, those
thing.
3 lines of code.
You don't put anything for the footer?
Nope. I mean, we'll talk about whether we want something or not, but and then save it. It just wasn't saved. It's still not. Yeah. And then if you go back to the refresh, so now it's okay. So this is happening most likely because you're using Flexbox, and it's within a container where it's a row, and so it's trying to put it next to it instead of underneath of it. So if we go back to your HTML. All right, so let's look at your CSS for a minute. And let's try to see where you're using Flex. So search for...
Right there.
So that is just Flex Wrap though, which actually I don't think will probably do, maybe it's doing something there. But the big thing is you have to, so when you want to use Flexbox, you have to choose a parent element and you want to set it to display flex, and that's what's going to cause it to actually do things like be in a row or be in a column or that type of thing, and that's when you would use flex wrap, for example. If you don't have a parent element that's display flex,
Right.
then flex wrap.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, the parent element has to have display flex first before you can do it.
Which is why normally you'll create a class called like row, and then row will have display flex, flex direction row, and then inside of that we'll have your columns.
Gotcha.
So it's probably happening, the float left that you're doing on line 32.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that that is causing that image that you have to float to the left of this form that you have, which is causing the form to come up, which works, but this is where like float is kind of a hack. So you have to do a clear fix after it to be able to get the footer to fall back down after the second image. But the easier way to do this, let's try to fix it the better way. So let's get rid of float left on line 32. And then let's create a new class called row.
So I'm gonna have to put in my HTML too, right?
Yep, but let's just start by putting, so if you just do dot row and then open, oops, and then just display colon flex. Okay, so now if you save that and then go to HTML, index.html. Okay, so you really want the article class content image and the aside class estimate to be divs that are next to each other, right? So to do that, you want to put them inside of another div that's going to have your class of row.
Okay.
So
can I just put a div around both of those?
Yep. So like on line 30, started. Yep. All the way to the end of that aside. Yep. And then if you save that, refresh, it should be it. Okay, so now they're right next to each other, but your footer's where it's supposed to be.
Right.
So if you want to spread them apart, the way to do that is if you go back to the CSS, inside of your row, you can add a new line, and you can do justify dash content, and then space around. And that'll push them away from each other and away from the edges of the screen. See? And then you have your footer, which you can then style your footer to be whatever.
I can style my footer. I can just text align that center, right?
Yeah, you can text align center, sure. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So that's the power of Flexbox, though, right? Like once you understand that you can create the row, and then each next level nested element that's at the same level.
Yeah.
So your aside,
all the children,
all the immediate children are going to be spread apart and separated and put into a row.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah. Can you resize it too? Can we just look?
Just with my, you want to do it in the developer or?
Yeah, you could just right here. You can just resize the size of the screen. Probably what's going to actually that worked out pretty well. So if you scroll down, you see how they dropped on top of each other. Now there's a weirdness probably because of some margins, etc.
Right.
But that's pretty much it. So.
All right. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Charles, you want to do it?
I think we're gonna have to like push some. I forgot what it gets though, so I'm gonna push them into.
Okay. All right. No problem. All right. Let's go ahead then and get started with today's class.
will mine hook up to whatever this is?
What's that?
So will my laptop hook up to this?
Yeah, it should. So you have to do the Solstice way of doing it. Yeah, or you can just pull up. I can just pull up your website if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I can show you what I do. But I didn't like push any changes on anything yet.
Okay, so if you want to go and do that, so to get the stuff up right, it's git add dot. Git and then enter and then git commit dash m and a message. TWD. So that says we're inside of your user's Charles directory. So if you type ls, then we can see you should have a code directory in there. It's probably higher up on the page if we scroll. Yeah, so there's a code directory.
Code. Okay.
So if you cd space code, cd,
CD space code right there.
and then ls. So there's your responsive stuff. So if you cd space responsive. Okay, now if you type git space status, that tells us, okay, you can modify those 3 files, so then we need to add and commit and push them. So if we git space add,
Oh shit. Go up.
you can just retype it. Git space add space dot. Press up. Space dot. So that says add everything in the current directory. The dot means the current directory. So add enter, and then git space commit space dash m, which is same with a message, and then it's a message, enter, and then git push origin Charles.
Okay.
Yep, and that's one of those, like, you probably want to write down in like a notepad or something.
Yeah.
Because we just do it over and over and over.
Okay. Tonight you just pull it up.
Yep.
Okay.
So. Nice. Parallax, huh?
I was working with that for a while. So
Yeah.
I completely understand it.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, parallax is essentially making it look like there's a page moving on top of another page.
Advanced on this, huh, Joe?
A little bit. So, again, completely didn't understand it. So I started this actually a few weeks ago. I just pulled up like a YouTube video. I didn't know what it was called. I finally researched it was called parallax. I just wanted to get that effect, that scrolling effect. I'm sorry, I'm standing in front of you. So one of the biggest things for me, especially with the photos, I feel like I wasn't able to accurately link them from the CSS file for some reason. Like I tried everything, I couldn't do it at all. But what I had to do was just ended up using the URLs.
Okay.
So I just used URLs from like stuff I already had.
Yep.
But yeah, and then I didn't get to the JavaScript, but the CSS and the HTML. That's as far as I got with that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. So the problem with the CSS not linking.
Mm-hmm.
So you downloaded the files and then put them into a directory and then tried to link to that?
I tried to.
So it's all about pathing, and my guess is it's about understanding the path because that's the most common. That's the most common people the most common issue people have with it,
Mhm.
which is we need to understand that when we are, so for example, here I can actually pull your code so we can actually look at it.
Okay. Then I tried to do the flex wrap thing as well, and I'm not sure if that was fully.
Okay.
If that
Yeah,
was
so we
me or
can
if that
we
was the
can
page.
we can look at, yeah, if we make the, so there's flex wrapping happening probably in your headers, these pieces here.
Okay.
That's just doing a weird thing because they're probably floating
Okay.
or position fixed. So if we look, all right. Yeah. So here's your HTML, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the CSS.
And I too copied the sections instead of doing the JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's not surprising. I mean, we really haven't gone over much of the JavaScript stuff yet. So, but the issue is, if I go to this website, for example,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, and I download it. Oops. So the first thing you have to do is go find it from your downloads. Here.
So I tried to create an image folder within that responsive code file. That's,
Yep.
That's simply what I tried to do.
Yep, so that's the first step. So you go inside a responsive, create a new folder called images or whatever, but images is a good name. Paste it, so we have our something.jpg, and if we go back to our index.css, so if we look at what's happening, index.css is actually being called inside of index.html,
Mm-hmm.
but in either case, they're both inside of the same directory,
Right.
right? So if we want to be able to access something that's inside of images, images is like a level deeper.
Okay.
Like it's underneath, like we have to click on images to be able to see the rest of the stuff,
Mhm.
right? So if we want to be able to get to that same place, we start at our current directory, which is dot, and then we're going to go into, so we have a slash,
Mhm.
and then we're going to go into images, and then we're going to get inside of images something.jpg.
Mm-hmm.
So that should end up having the same impact. But it doesn't.
So even if it's within the same folder, do you want to start with a dot?
You,
I didn't in mine, I didn't access it.
yeah, if it's in the same folder, so you can do the same thing like this, where you don't put a dot slash, but it should be able to find
I
that.
tried dot. I tried dot.
Oh,
Dot.
this is the website, so it has to be pushed first, doesn't it? To see the changes.
I'm so,
Oh, the index
Mhm.
file.
but maybe not. Maybe I thought I did and I didn't actually. Yeah, no. So this is local. So you see the file up here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I should be seeing, I guess, is the water, and that should be fine. It should do the exact same thing. There's no reason.
You said the water.
Yeah, because if I put it back to
Mhm.
what it was.
Is that
Well, this one, yeah, the second two sections have random page.
Oh,
random,
okay,
yeah.
okay, that makes
But
sense.
this one, yeah, is just a set object. A
Yeah.
set photo.
Yeah, so I would have expected it.
is this a CSS file?
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah, so that's, and it should be the same. It should be just about swapping these two things out. I can play with it a little bit later to figure out what's actually going on there, but there's no reason why what I just did should not work, which is just naming where it is locally instead of naming where it is on the web. So I'm not.
If it's something else I typed in there along the way, but I could.
Oh, so I am replacing it. I don't know why because it's not the water. So the image that I'm bringing up here is this image that's in your background here.
Right.
So it is working.
Okay.
So that's all it is. You just name the path locally, just like that. But you do have to put in images / whatever the name of the image was .jpeg. If you downloaded it, it had that random number hash, and so it's possible that, like, especially if you tried to type that in, that you missed something, or even if you tried to copy it, that you just missed one of those numbers, and as a result, it wasn't showing up because it has to be exactly the same name. But
okay,
yeah, I mean,
I did it for the local image too. Like, I really did do it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I believe you. I just, it's hard for me to help when if I can't see it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But yeah,
those would be my guesses, though. It's probably just a mistyped thing or a miscopied thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I got.
Cool. Yeah, no, looks good.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah, and it does a decent job of scaling, except for these guys, which I think is related to section 2. My guess is there's some CSS that you're using that is causing things to, yep, right here, this positioned relative.
Okay.
Fix. Yeah, you want to fix.
I'm not sure exactly what we want, because I'm not sure how those things are positioned within the HTML themselves, but there's something about the way that the positioning is rendering that's causing them to sit on top of each other instead of staying in the locations.
Position on them?
No.
So the Z index shouldn't matter, like it'll cause them to sit on top of each other inside of the website, but the positioning where it's like drawing them all back up to the top instead of leaving them spread down into their locations where they're set on the page. It's probably something about the size. See how the size of the page causes them to like come up? There's something about the positioning which is maybe related to the width, or I'm not sure. I have to look a little bit closer.
So
But
if you flex wrapped that, would it help or no?
no, so there's all kinds of. So he's got. So flex wrap, right, is just about. Let's say that these represent 3 divs. So in my code, they're actually written on top of each other.
Right.
But I have a parent div that's called row, for example. And each one of these is 50 pixels. And so what's going to happen in my row is, right now it's 200 pixels. So when my row is 200 pixels, and I've got, so this is a display flex, the parent's set to display flex. By default, the flex direction is row. So my divs come up and they sit next to one another. As I make my parent smaller, which is to say I make the window smaller and so the parent gets smaller, when the row reaches 149 pixels, 50 plus 50 plus 50 is 150, so I can't keep going to the right. Like, I can't maintain this row because I'm too wide. At that point, if you have flex wrap set, this one will drop underneath that.
Okay.
And then, right, so 50 plus 50 is 100, so when I get down to 99 pixels, now I'm going to get to, okay, I can only support one div at a time, and so it'll move into having all 3.
So theoretically, what if you go down to 80 pixels? What would happen?
Nothing. From that point forward, it's just like
Speed.
that.
Okay.
I mean, when you get down to 40 pixels, half of it will be cut off. It'll be off the screen. You'll get a horizontal scroll bar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah, so what's important is it's basically adding up the width of these guys, and when the container, so when the parent is too small to contain them as a row, it'll allow them to drop one at a time until the space is recovered. Okay. All right, so today we're going to start officially talking about JavaScript. We've been doing a lot of prep coming up to here. I'm going to try and let most of today be available for you to work through the labs so that I can try and help you where appropriate there. We're going to do the same review process that we have so far with a couple of additions. So the first thing is, can anybody tell me what the DOM is? Is it the DOM?
The object model.
Yep, the document object model. So what is that?
Great question.
Yeah. We've seen it a whole bunch of times actually already. Let me go ahead and get into this is the document object model. This, everything that's right here in this space, that is the document object model. But that's just HTML, right? So what's the difference between HTML and the document object model?
Call JavaScript with it?
You can use JavaScript to access it, is a big part of it. So what's happening is that the browser looks at your HTML and it says, okay, I have these elements. I'm going to put them into a structured tree that I can get access to, that I can dynamically get access to and change. So for example, you see like how this creates a tree. So right now it's a pretty small tree, but underneath of HTML is two elements. One is head, one is body. Underneath of head is one element link. Underneath of body is an element div, an element of button, and an element of script. Now, what we can do, because this is really being represented in JavaScript, so in the browser it's made this, all this HTML, all these document objects available to us in JavaScript as a hash. So everything is nested underneath of one another, and we can search that nested hash for the elements that we're looking for. So for example, if I go back to my JavaScript and I just type console.log document, back over here, you see how document exists right here? And I can click on it and it shows me just exactly the same. Like all that's being listed right here is exactly what I just did, which is document, which is just a visual representation of the HTML that exists inside of our document, which is all of it in our case. So we can see all of it here, and we can also interact with it because the browser provides some nice developer tools. But you see, whether I'm highlighting body up here or I'm highlighting body down here, I'm getting the same effect. So what's nice then is I can actually access elements and modify them using JavaScript in this way. So I can, for example, now say document.get element by ID body, which if we look at our index.html, the body tag has an ID of body. So I can get access to that element, and we can console log out what that looks like. So it's just going to show me the body, right? So it's not all the text now because it's not the entire document, but it is the body piece. And then because this is really a JavaScript object, it has a bunch of functions on it that we can use. So for example, we can set the inner HTML of body to be hello world. And now when we refresh the page, you get hello world. because what we've done is replaced the HTML inside of body, which used to be that button and a couple of other things. We've replaced it with hello world. So if we inspect the element now, we're going to see that body, all it has inside of it is hello world.
Is this overwriting what's in your HTML?
It is overriding what was in your HTML. So if I put a debugger in just to slow this down, so we'll put a debugger right here. When I initially load the page, you see we're stopped at the debugger. We haven't executed the rest of that code yet. When I initially start the page, inside of body is all of this HTML. But when I let that next line of code execute, it completely replaces it, and you saw it happen over here with the HTML that we're setting it to. Does that make sense? Okay. So that is a big piece of it. The next thing that we can do is we can actually say, let's just set a variable called element equal to our body HTML. And then instead of just resetting the HTML, maybe we want to append an element to it. So we could create an element. So we could say ul equals document dot create element ul. So this is going to, in memory, and by that I mean it's not going to show up on the page yet, but the browser is going to know about it. There's going to be a variable called ul. I'm going to create an element which is going to be a ul element, which is our unordered list, right? We can then take that element and append it onto our body element. So if we do element.append child ul, you see how that element shows up there? So that's happening because we say go find the element that has an ID of body, and then we're going to create an element in memory called ul, and then we're going to append that child onto our original element, which is our body element. So we can go, if we just do this, there is no ul. But once we append the child onto our element, we end up with the ul.
Will that show up in your index.html at this point? Or only when it won't?
No, it's not in your index.html. It is only happening at runtime, it's called. Okay. So it's only when the browser evaluates your JavaScript that it shows up. But it's not, yeah, so I'll prove that to you, but it's not here. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the nice thing about that is that then we can start to append list items into our unordered list. So instead of actually getting the element by ID body, let's actually move our ul into the HTML. So let's, we talked about creating a task list. Oh, there we go. We talked about creating a to-do list last time, and that's the exercise that we're going to slowly go through over the course of the next few classes so that we can see how all of this stuff plays out together and how we can create something that allows us to create and remove and update list items. So right now we have our body, and then we have a div with an ID of list, and we have a button with an ID of create task. I'm just going to change our div to be a ul, so it's an unordered list instead of just being a div. And what I want to be able to do is dynamically add a list item, which is take out the garbage. Okay. So instead of, so I could do it this way, right? I could type li take out the garbage. Okay, and it's going to look something like that. But I don't want to do it explicitly in the HTML because eventually I want whoever the user is to be able to type whatever they want to, and they can't touch my code, right? Like you never go into a website and start changing the code. So I want to create a form item eventually where when they enter in the task, it is going to show up inside of the list. So given what we did a moment ago, how would we potentially, and I know this is a lot, but we'll just step through it. How would I potentially add a list item dynamically into our element that has an ID of list? So here we have a UL, an unordered list that has an ID of list. How would I dynamically add into that a list item that says take out the garbage? So let's
say you're going to append the LI somewhere.
You're going to append an LI somewhere. So let's start here. So element, I'm setting equal to document.getElement by ID list. So what is element currently?
No, UL.
It's going to be that UL. How would I find out what element is right here?
You could
just type it. Can you just type it in the console?
You could you could type in console.log, right? So you can console.log, what is element? And that's huge, because as we get into actually doing more JavaScript, you're going to want to be able to debug things, and you're going to want to use console.log. It's going to be a good friend of yours. So I'm just going to comment out the other code for the moment. And we see that when I log out element, I get back ULID list, which is my ULID list, right? So given that that's what my element is, how do I now append a list item, so an LI into that? That is, take out the garbage.
So put LI equals document create element, dot create element.
Sure, we can do LI equals document.create element.
And then it's going to be LI in parentheses, I guess.
And then it'll be LI instead of UL. Yep.
Are you going to append LI?
Then we're going to append LI onto the element,
Are you?
which does partially what we want. So it did largely what we're trying to get towards, right? Because that does put the LI inside of the UL, inside of our document, but it still doesn't say take the garbage out. So go ahead, Jen. You want?
No, I was thinking. So would you then? I mean, you don't want to put the whole thing in there, would you? Like the entire open and closing with the content inside of it. It seems like it seems like there's a quicker step than to put the entire.
So let me ask this: how did we add text to the body? How did I get "Hello World" to get inside of the body tag?
Oh, inner HTML.
Yeah. So what do I want to call inner HTML on?
On the LI.
On the LI. Where do I need to do that?
At the top.
Like up here?
Number 2.
On line 2?
Yeah.
Like here? Sorry, it's just, I don't know.
I thought we would do it on the end of the parentheses.
Over here?
Got inner HTML.
Try that. Inner HTML equals take out the garbage.
Yeah. Won't hurt to try.
Doesn't hurt to try, it's just software. That kind of works. It doesn't quite work, and the reason why is we don't see the dot over here, right? It's not really a list item. And if you look over here, there's no LI. So it kind of does what we wanted, because it does put the HTML inside of there. But you see what's really happening is we're setting the inner HTML.
On the list and not on the LI.
That's right.
So can we put it this way? Can we put it on the element.append?
So you can't. So the append child is just going to, all it does is take the LI and it puts it inside of the element. So let's try this, right? We don't know what to do. Let's start looking at what these things are. So console.log li, for example. What do you think that's going to log out? Well, so it logs out our li element, the whole thing, right? Which is very similar to when we logged out the element. The element has all of the HTML inside of it for the UL, because the element is finding the element with an ID of list, and we're then console logging that out. We're creating then an li, and then console logging that out. Those two things are the same. They're both parts of the document object model. They are both JavaScript objects that we can do the exact same methods against. So if when we did element.innerHTML, take out the garbage, we replace the HTML inside of the UL, how do we replace the HTML inside of the LI?
next to the document.create element.
Yeah. So, but you want so we can try that. HTML equals. I'm just going to put test for the moment. So that doesn't do anything, and it complains that you failed to execute append child. The reason is that this method here is just creating the element. So we're just setting the result of creating the element to our LI. If we want to change the LI in our HTML, we just do it right after. So it was really close. We're just saying, Chen, it's just right after. And then we get data. Now what's interesting about this is we can actually do it after it's been appended, because we still have access to that element, and so even though we've already added the LI into the page, we can after the fact change what its HTML is. So if I do that again, we get the exact same result. Now to go through that a little bit more slowly, I'm going to again put some debuggers in. So we'll put a debugger in after each of these things. Okay. So first thing we do is we go and get our element, and you can actually see there's a whole lot of attributes and classes that are available to us. If we type element into the console, we'll see that that's our UL ID of list. But there's actually lots of things that we can do with element, one of which is change its inner HTML, which you'll see a little bit further down. It's right here. One of which is to append a child, which is what we're going to do later. But there are lots of different options available to us. All right, so that's our debugger. We have the element. We haven't actually done anything with it yet. We've just gotten access to it. If we continue forward, we then have our LI. Our LI, again, has a lot of those same attributes, a lot of those same functions available to it. If we go look at our elements in the HTML right now, we still haven't added the LI into the list, right? And we can still see that there's a button there. So if we go back to our sources and we click next, now we've appended LI onto our list. And if we go back to the elements, we now see that there's an LI that's been appended in. But we have not yet set the inner HTML of LI, right? And so if we go back to our sources, we're going to do that in the next go. So when I click next, then we see it actually updates. If I reverse the order of that, so I put li.innerHTML first and then append child, it's going to go in this. It's going to go in the order that the code's written. So we have our element, but we haven't actually added anything yet. We've now created an element of li, but we haven't appended or put it into its inner HTML. We haven't changed its inner HTML. At this point, the li has an inner HTML of take out the garbage, but we don't see it on the screen yet. And if we go back to the elements, you'll see it's still not appended in here. But when I click next, it'll append it in, but the inner HTML of the li at that point has already been set to take out garbage, so it just shows up all at once.
Go back to the source code. So that first element equals document dot, yeah, that part. The document dot get element by ID.
Yep.
That's like a already like predetermined like syntax.
Yeah, it's a function that's made available to you from JavaScript all the time when you're in a web browser.
And that's pretty much saying, go get this element that exists.
Go find. So document refers to your HTML structure at the highest level. It's saying go inside of the document and try and find an element that has an ID of list.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then what this line is doing is saying create a new li element, and then this one's saying and change its inner HTML, so what's inside of it, to be take out the garbage.
So any element that we wanted to change the inner HTML, it's always going to be element dot inner HTML.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And then elements out of append child will actually push the elements inside of the other elements. It'll push the li elements inside of the list elements.
Gotcha.
Yep. So let's say that I wanted to start with a list of items, not just one item, but instead I wanted to start with a list of items that were take out the garbage, go to store, put child to bed. How could I accomplish that, again, dynamically, not just writing it in the HTML? So basically,
repeat the li.innerHTML.
So
and then put the next thing in. Go to store.
So try to go to store here, and then put child to bed.
Sure.
I'm just going to put a debugger in after each one of these just so we can see what's actually happening. You guys understand what's happening with the debugger, right? Like, so it's executing the code and it stops at that point, and then we go to the next. Okay.
I think what's going to happen is going to replace each one every time.
That was a very good guess, Chad. So let's watch. So we have our LI. The LI right now is just, and I can type it in the console so we can see, it's just an LI element. When I go to the next one, the inner HTML is set to take out the garbage. So if I type LI now, it looks like that. It doesn't show up on our page yet. Why doesn't it show up on our page yet?
We haven't
appended it yet, so it's not going to show up on our page until we get to line 12. Okay, so then we go on to the next one, and if I type LI, it's now going to be go to store, and then we go to the next one, and now if I type LI, it's going to be put child to bed. So now if I call element.append child LI, what are we going to see? Just the last one.
So you need to append after each one.
So we could do that. We could try that. All right. So just to be clear, there's our LI. It's just the element. That's good sign, right? So that's good. And then we go to the next one. Go to store, and then we go to the next one, put child to bed.
So we're replacing.
So
Because
we
we're
have to
replacing.
create 3 LI elements first.
So that's one way. We could try that. So instead of naming all of these LI, we could call them LI 1, 2, and 3. Alright, so let's give that a shot. So we've created our 3 LI elements. They should all essentially be the same thing. Right. If I click next, we get take out the garbage. Click next, we get go to store. Click next, we get put child to bed. So that's what we're looking for. And that's awesome.
But there's an easier way.
But there's a slightly better way. So what do we know about JavaScript that might make this a little bit faster, a little bit less code is really what we're looking for. So looping is one way. Let's start with something slightly different. So instead of writing, if we want to reuse our code, what is the thing that we use to reuse code?
Function.
Functions. So what function could we create that would allow us to be able to do these two lines of code, which are almost identical, inside of a function, right? So we're basically repeating this line, and this line over and over again, right? So that's a great place for a function. Whenever you're repeating codes, you want to create a function. So so we could say function. We probably don't want to call it append child because that's a JavaScript thing, but we can call it append.
Right.
I mean, we can call it whatever we want, but so let's call it append. And so we said, right, we're going to use, we keep rewriting that line of code, this line of code, and this line of code over and over again, right? So how can we use this function to replace, here, let me split these up a little bit better so it's a little bit easier to see. Right, so just to be clear, we're essentially doing the same thing here as we're doing here as we're doing here. What's the difference between those three pieces of code?
Just the item, the list item itself.
Just the inner HTML, because remember the other things are just variables that we're creating. In fact,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, because in fact we could just do this and this would work. The reason it would work is that we are resetting li as a variable to a new element every time. Right? So even if we make them all have the same variable name.
So in the parentheses, will we just essentially put the three tasks separated by columns?
So what you want to put inside of the parentheses is whatever, you want to create a variable for whatever it is that changes from one set of code to another. So in our set of code, the thing that's changing is the inner HTML, right? So we're going to create a parameter called HTML, and then where should HTML go inside of our code in the function? What's the thing that we want to replace every time? Take out the garbage, right? That we don't want to say take out the garbage every time we call append. We want to say whatever HTML is as a variable, right? So we want to put HTML there. So now if I want to call that function, so if I want to say take out the garbage, I could write these three lines of code, or I could write what?
Parentheses.
Yep, and then
whatever you wanted to say.
So what should we put for take out the garbage?
Take out the garbage.
Take out the garbage. And then if we wanted to, so that means we can delete this guy, right? So what if I want to replace go to store? Go to store. And then if I want to replace put the child to bed, put the child to bed, right? So let's start. I'm not actually going to get rid of put the child to bed. I'm just going to start by doing those two. What do we think when this code executes? What are we going to end up seeing in our browser now?
Put child
You see that twice though?
Say that again?
What do you see put child to bed twice?
So you will see put child to bed, and that's the first thing we're going to see.
You're going to take the other two under it.
And then we're going to see the other two underneath of it. Because it's going to read from top to bottom, right? So we have our debuggers in, so we should actually stop at each one of these. And I'll actually put a debugger inside the function too, so we can see what happens when we execute that code. Okay? So let's refresh the page. We get here, we've got our element. Our element is just our UL. We've seen over and over again. I'm going to then create an element called li. I'm going to change center HTML to be put child to bed, and I'm going to append the child to our ul element. So what that's going to do is create our put child to bed list item. Now we pass up that function. We didn't go inside of the function at all. We never ended up on line 9, right? So we haven't actually executed the function because we haven't called it. So we have to wait until we actually call the function before it'll execute any of the code inside of it. So now we're going to call the function append with the parameter take out the garbage. So if I click go, you see now we're inside the function. So what is HTML at this point? Take out the garbage, right? Because take out the garbage is right here, and when you call a function, whatever the parameter is becomes whatever you put in to the function call. So HTML is take out the garbage, and then if we continue, we'll see li gets added, and now we're past that function call. So now we're going to call append go to store. So what is HTML now? Go to store, and then we're going to append that. So you see, essentially we are cleaning up our code. It's called drying up our code, which is do not repeat yourself, don't repeat yourself. So we are drying up our code by using a function to reuse the pieces that we can, and then only modify the one piece that we actually care about. So we could do the same thing then for put child to bed. And now we've gone from, I don't know, whatever, it was like 15 lines of code to 12 lines of code. So we got a little bit smaller. This is a pretty simple thing, so.
The only thing that they keep is telling the document to go find the element named list.
Yes, we still keep that element named list, yeah.
When this is being used, where's the inner HTML coming from? Because you're not going to type that, right? It's supposed to be what the user is inputting.
Yep.
So how is what the user is inputting getting there?
Yep. Yep. So let's.
It's an input field. It's an on click. It's a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah, we can do it real quick though. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to create an input field here. I'm going to set the type to text. I set an ID of new task.
Yep.
Okay. We have our button here that's create task. So if we go back, there we go. We've got our input. We've got to create task, right? Okay. We talked about this a little bit last time, but we can create event listeners, they're called, that listen to events that happen when you interact with elements on the page. So in our case, what we really want to do is when you click the create task button, we at that point want to append whatever is inside of the input button onto our list, right? So does anybody remember how we create an event listener in JavaScript? So what we want to listen for is when somebody clicks on the button. All right, so does anybody remember how we do that?
Yep.
We try?
So we're going to take the... So are we still using the... we have the function here, so we're going to...
Yeah, so we're listening for when we click on this, which has an ID of create_task.
Doesn't it go after the document?
Yep.
By ID.
Yep, so we want to get element by ID.
Get element by ID, and then
create task was the name of our button.
And then dot the event listener.
Yeah, so it's dot add event listener.
That should be like click or on click or something, right?
Yep, so it's click, so we're going to listen for click, and then we're going to pass it what? So this is that anonymous function thing. So we're just going to pass it a function. We haven't created this function yet, but we will in a second. So we'll just say add task is going to be the name of our function. Okay. Now we have to create that function, so we'll create a function called add task. Okay. So inside of this function, the first thing we need to do is get the value that's inside of our input box. So the first thing we really need to do then is get access to the input box. So we've done this a bunch of times now. How do we get access to the element of our input box? So up here we got our element for list by saying document.getElement by ID list. Down here we said get access to the button by using document.getElement by ID create task. So how would we get access to the input button?
So it's going to be new task to the ID.
Yep.
So I'm going to just say element equals document element by ID new task, new underscore task.
Yep. Document.getElement by ID.
It's essentially we're telling the document to go find a new task.
Yep.
ID.
Okay. Now we've done something here that gets a little bit hairy. There's this thing called scoping, where because this element is at the root of our page, it's not inside of a function, it is a global variable, which means it's accessible from within any function, but it's also accessible outside of all the functions. The problem with what we've done here is we haven't encapsulated, it's called, our variable, which is to say that when add task gets called, it's going to overwrite the global variable element with our newly created variable element. So all we really want to do to just be safe is we'll just put element inside of the function. So now it's scoped to only within the function. So this element is only available within this function. We don't have to worry about other functions having a variable with the same name. It's a little bit more advanced than we probably need, but you'll probably run into that issue at some point. Okay, so we have our element, which is document.getElement by ID, new task, which is our input. So if we want to then append the value of our element, which in this case is whatever is inside of our input, how would we do that? So let's just start with, we don't really know what to do yet, so let's just console.log out what our element is. So if I refresh the page, I'm just going to type something in here, and I'm going to click Create Task. What we get back is our element. Now this isn't particularly informative because it only gives us the element when you console.log it out. Let's instead put a debugger in so we can really see what's going on. So we're going to put a debugger in here, I'm going to refresh, we're going to type something, and click Create Task. It's going to stop right here, but now we can see a lot more information about it. Right, so you can scroll through this list. The way I did that, by the way, we're in the debugger right here. I can put my cursor over it, and that creates this list of things. The other way to do it is I can type element. Oh, no, that gets us back to the problem that we had before. So I'm in element up here, and I can actually see all of the attributes that are available on element. If we scroll down far enough, we can see that if there's a value attribute called something. Okay? So if you remember back to when we talked about objects before, how do we get, so if we have element and it has an attribute, so really this is saying I have a variable called element, which is an object that has a whole bunch of attributes in it, one of which is value, which is equal to something. So how would I get the value of something from element? Let me try this a different way. Say that I create a variable called car, and I say that it's set to an object that has a type of Mustang. How do I console.log out Mustang?
We call it type, right?
car, and then, so it's going to be console.log car, and then, so here, let's start with that. So let's just do this simple case where we have an object. So here, I'm just going to create a variable called car. I'm going to set it equal type Mustang, and then I'm just going to console.log out car. Let's just start with that. So when I click create task, you can see that's what my object looks like. Okay. This is the same as what we're getting for element. It's basically saying element has a value of something. Okay. Or we just want something. So if I want to just console log out Mustang, how do I do that? So if this is car, how do I get to Mustang? It's going to be car.type, it's called, or it's going to be car parentheses square bracket type. It's just like that. Okay, so we can do one of those two things. So if element, in this case EL, has a property in its object of value, which is equal to something, how do I console log out something?
Element square brackets value.
Yeah, so you can do element square brackets value, or the equivalent is element.value. It's because I created a variable, but yeah, we can type element. Right now it's blank because it's actually blank. I created a variable up here in the console. So let's just start that over so we can see. So if I come back here and I put a debugger in, I'm going to type hello. I'm going to click create task. Stop here. When we go to element, if I scroll all the way down to where value is, it says hello. So if I want to get the value, I need to type element dot value, and I get back hello. Okay, so if we go back to our JavaScript, if I want to append hello as a list item, how do I do that?
You'll do append child li square bracket.
Okay, don't forget, we still have this function that we already created that does this, right?
So we're just going to call append, and then we're going to do, hold on, new task, no. Yeah.
It's just,
oh no, we're calling, you want the li part, you want the li part.
I just want the value, right? So look, so element.value is hello. I want hello to move up into our list items. What we've already created up here is a function. So let me try it this way.
So you want
if I call right here append how are you today, right? Remember, add task gets called when I click on the create task button, right? So if I refresh this page, if I click on the create task button, what's going to happen? Let's just follow the code for a minute. So this says whenever you click on the create task button, call the add task function, right? We're going to go inside of the add task function. That's going to set our element equal to get element by ID, our new task, which is our input button. But then we're going to call append how are you today. What is append how are you today going to do? Well, if we go inside of here, it's going to have HTML set to how are you today. And then it's going to say, okay, element get element by ID list, which is, remember, our UL. It's going to create an element called li. It's going to set the inner HTML of that li element to how are you today. And then we're going to append the li into our UL element, right? So we can debugger all the way through that, right? But we just did this whole process. All we're doing now, right, before we explicitly called append how are you today. I can delete all this other code. Let's just maybe even start there, okay? So when I do this, we get how are you today, right? This is the exact same example that we started the class with, right? So if I want to append to that list, go to the store, what's going to happen now? It'll add go to the store. And then if I append, put child to bed, what's going to happen? Put child to bed, right? So if I go back now to this example, when I click on the create task button, it's going to call the add task function, right? So when I click on the button, it's going to call append how are you today. So if I refresh my page, if I click the create task button, what's going to happen? It's going to print how are you today, right? And in fact, I can keep clicking it and I'll keep doing that over and over again. Okay. So, but I don't want to append how are you today. I want to append whatever value is inside of this input. Right? And we said that the way that you get access to that element is by saying element equals document .get element by ID new task. And we said that the value, the word that you write in there, is going to be value equals element.value, right?
So new task.value.
So it's element.value, right? So like if I'm right here, I put the debugger back in, I can put a console.log in. Right, when I click that, it's going to try to console log out element.value, which right now is blank, right? If I change that to be something, you see it console.logs out whatever I have there. If I change that to be, again, console.logs out again, right? Because the element, which is this input box here, has a value of again. And what I'm console.logging out is element.value. See that? And the reason why I knew that element had a value, which was again, is that I went and scrolled over it and I looked down here until I found something that said, it's really far down, but I went to found something that said again. So I know that its value is again when the value is again. When the word written inside of it is again, it is an object that has an attribute of value with the value of again. So at that point, I know if I console.log out element.value that I'm going to get it to console.log out. What do I need to do so that instead of console logging it out, it actually appends it onto our list?
So would you append?
Yep.
Is it create task or new task?
So what is element.value right here?
The new task?
Yeah, so what is it? Let's start here. What is it? So what is it? Element? Element is the new task, right? So what does that actually reference in our HTML here?
The input of a new task.
The input that has an ID of new task, right? New task is just a made up thing. It can be whatever. It's just, right? So the input is what we're referencing. We said that, so element is equal to the input, right? And we know that if we console.log out element.value, we get what?
The value of the input.
The value of the input, whatever it is that's been written inside of there, right? So if I want to append whatever that value of the element is, what do I need to put inside of here?
Element.value.
Element.value. Okay, so I know that's a lot. There's a lot of different pieces in there, but this is where things start to get really cool because now you have complete control over what your DOM is actually doing.
Can you screenshot that JavaScript and put it on Slack?
Yeah, in fact,
Just so I can, or push it to.
yeah, I was gonna say I can also put it in Slack, but I'll push it to our learning get to repo.
So why do you think they start with the DOM first before like the function and method concept?
Sorry, one sec. Yeah, so there's a SAM dash to do. Here, I can go. Alright, so you can go look at it. What are you saying?
So why did they start with DOM before like
Functions and variables and all that stuff. I mean, I think probably because it's more interesting. Like you actually can start manipulating the page immediately. The problem is like you don't really have any idea what's going on or why it's working. It just feels like magic,
Right.
which is why I tried to like back up and move to function and variable and that stuff.
Exactly.
But it's less fun the way that we've done it, right? Like you don't actually get to see a to-do list until you get to today.
Right.
It's just, I mean, even now, you guys, we've been going over variables and functions for a while. It still, I'm sure, is a lot of magic that's happening, right? And so, you know, it just takes a while to start to have all of this stuff start to sink in. So,
Gotcha.
but let's just go back to it one more time. We're just going to do one more review, then we'll take a break, and then we'll work on our code for we'll work on our labs for the rest of the class. But can somebody else walk me through what's actually happening here? So let me just start with, why is the script tag at the bottom of our HTML? Why is index.js being included at the bottom of our HTML? Because the browser reads from top to bottom. So when we are looking for, right here on this line, we're looking for create task, looking for an element that has create task as an ID. If we put script at the top in the head, which is really where it's supposed to go, there's some ways to deal with that, but if you put the script at the top here, what we're going to do is the browser is going to say, okay, I see there's a doc type of HTML. Okay, it has an HTML tag. Nested inside of that is a head tag. Nested inside of that is some CSS. Let me go ahead and load that. Nested inside of that is index.js. Let me go ahead and load that. Okay, let me run whatever index.js is. So it's going to go inside of this file. It's going to read these functions, which don't do anything until they're called. And then it's going to read this, and it's going to say document.getElement by ID create task. And where is where's an element that has create task? It's after that. So it won't know about it yet. So we have to put our script tag to the bottom of the screen, to the bottom of the HTML. Okay. But, so once it loads, it's immediately, when we get to the JavaScript, now after create task in the HTML, it's going to call this line of code. So what does this line of code do?
That is where it collects the information when people click create task.
Yeah, so explicitly it is adding an event listener. So it's listening for when somebody clicks on the button. What is it listening for them to click on?
Create task.
The element that has an ID of create task, right? So we're going to use getElement by ID a lot. It doesn't have to be by ID. It could be by tag name, for example. But that's a gets element by tag name, which is an array. So but we could change this to be button, which would go find it by button, and then we have to get the first one. Okay. There are other ways of finding elements is the point. We're going to use ID because it's the most obvious, because there's only one element with an ID on a page at a time, but you can find elements in other ways. So it's going to go search the document for an element that has an ID of create task, and then it's going to add an event listener, which means it's going to listen for when somebody clicks on that button. So what, yep,
Sorry, can you go back to the HTML?
yep,
So you created that ID, so then you can then CSS that ID.
you could also CSS. You can,
Okay,
yep, you can also apply CSS to the ID.
so you can link, because if you did it the other way that you just showed, could you link CSS to that as well, or no? It would be different.
Oh, a tag name?
Right.
Yeah, it's the same, right? Because it's just that with, and you have done this, it's just in your CSS selector, you're using the actual tag name. So instead of doing, so I could either do create task, right, which is the same as get element by ID, or I could do button, which is the same as get elements by tag name. Does that make sense? Or there is also a get elements by class name, which is the same as red in our case.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So what's going to happen now when I click on the button?
It's going to run the function add task.
It's going to run the function add task, which is whatever the second parameter is that we're adding to our event listener. Okay, so I click the button add task. It's going to run this function. What does the first line in this function do?
Search the document for an element that has an ID of new task,
Yep.
and then
And what element is that in our HTML?
the input.
The input, right? The input field.
The input field on the form, and then once you do that, run the append function
It's going to run the append function.
with, I guess, the values of the element.value.
So it's going to, with the parameter HTML being set to element.value, which is going to be what?
The new task.
What do you mean by that?
The value of what they typed.
Yeah, the value of what they typed, right? So what is element.value right now?
This is awesome.
This is awesome. What is it now?
This is blue.
This is blue. Okay. So when I click on the button, in this case, right, we have this is blue written there. If I click create task, it is going to say, okay, I was listening for a click. Whenever I see a click, call add task. Add task comes here. It says, okay, go find the element new task. New task is our input button. It says get the value. What is element.value right now?
It is the well. It is this is blue.
It is this is blue.
Right.
So then it's going to call the append function. And if append was called with element.value, where element.value is this is blue, what is the HTML?
This is blue.
This is blue. So we're then going to run line 3, which is doing what?
Now, search the document for the element with the ID of list.
Yep, which in our HTML is going to be what?
UL.
Yeah, the UL, the unordered list here, because it has an ID of the list.
And then once you do that, you're going to create another element of a list item.
Yep,
And then to that list item, we want to write in the HTML,
yeah, we're going to change its inner HTML to be HTML, which is,
our element.value, which is this is blue.
that's right.
Yeah.
And then we're going to
Append
Append the listed item.
append the child to that list item.
yeah, so we're going to append the list item to our element, which is our unordered list item. So we're going to put it in to index.html. It's going to go right inside of here. Does that make sense? It's a lot of stuff, and we're going to do this over and over and over again. We'll do these to-do lists together, but that's what we're doing, and that ultimately is where we're getting to. That's where the real power of programming in the web comes in, because then you can start to you can probably start to see you could take all that HTML from each of your pages and you could just swap it in. So when they click on the button, you essentially get the values that you need, and you pass it into a function which renders the information. Same way that we're doing it right here. Okay. Does that make sense? ish. I mean, it's gonna take a little while. Some of it is just doing it over and over again. The good news is we're now at the point where you're actually going to be practicing going through labs and doing this stuff. So, okay. Yep. So go ahead and start working on your labs, and I will be here to help.